I knew something was wrong, but didn't expect my husband to be battling a secret addiction, sharing the heartbreak, denial, and eventual strength it took to rebuild our life. And so I did in the end, and I've never regretted it, despite his own hidden struggles and that resilient love that we found in our marriage. I remember the morning with a terrible clarity. It was a Tuesday, the kind of gray, quiet Tuesday that usually passed without much notice in our suburban life. The kids were at school and Mark was supposedly at work, but he wasn't. He hadn't been for days. I stood in the kitchen, a mug of cold tea clutched in my hands, staring at the perfectly normal array of dishes in the sink. The sun was trying to break through the clouds, casting weak, watery light across the laminate countertop, but the light couldn't touch the deep, churning darkness that had settled in my gut over the past few months. I felt it almost physically, a cold, heavy stone lodged beneath my ribs. Something was fundamentally, terrifyingly wrong. It wasn't just the late nights or the evasive answers anymore. It wasn't just the unexplained absences or the way his eyes, once so clear and full of life, had taken on a dull, distant sheen. It was the feeling of a world tilting on its axis, a profound sense of loss for something I hadn't even fully identified yet. The silence in our house was a scream, echoing all the words we hadn't said, all the truths we'd buried under layers of polite smiles and strained pleasantries. I walked slowly through our home, a home we'd built together, brick by brick, dream by dream. Every photograph on the wall, every piece of furniture felt like a lie. Our family photo on the mantelpiece, capturing a moment of manufactured joy from last summer's holiday, seemed to mock me. Who were these people? Who was I? And more importantly, who was he? I ran my fingers over the framed picture, the plastic cool beneath my touch. Mark's arm was around my waist, his smile wide and genuine, or so I had thought. Looking at it now, I searched his eyes, hunting for a clue, a shadow, anything that could have prepared me for the earthquake that was about to hit. But there was nothing, just the loving gaze of the man I had married, the man I believed I knew inside and out, the man who was, at that very moment, meticulously dismantling our life, piece by painful piece, with a secret so insidious, so destructive, it would change the very fabric of our existence forever. I didn't know then, standing in that sun-dappled kitchen, that my world was about to shatter, that the man I loved had been leading a double life for years, quietly battling a demon I couldn't even name. I didn't know that the journey to rebuild would be longer, harder, and more heartbreaking than anything I could possibly imagine. I only knew that the silence in our home was about to be broken by a truth so loud, it would deafen me. Our story, like many others, began with a spark that felt like destiny. Mark and I met in our early 20s, back when life felt boundless and full of infinite possibilities. I was fresh out of university, working my first real job at a marketing agency, and he was an ambitious engineer, full of ideas and a quiet determination that I found incredibly attractive. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue, a hazy summer evening filled with laughter and cheap beer. I remember him leaning against a tree, watching the crowd, a thoughtful expression on his face. When our eyes met, there was an immediate connection, a feeling of recognition that went deeper than words. He had a kind smile, an easy laugh, and a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room when he spoke to me. Our dates were simple but meaningful. Long walks in the park, cooking together in his tiny apartment, dreaming out loud about the future. We talked for hours, sharing our fears and our hopes. He spoke of wanting a family, a home filled with warmth and laughter, a life built on solid ground. I saw in him everything I had ever wanted in a partner: stability, kindness, intelligence, and a deep-seated integrity. We fell in love quickly and fiercely. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was a steady, deepening current that pulled us closer with each passing day. Our wedding day, 3 years later, was everything I had imagined, held in a picturesque country estate, surrounded by our closest friends and family. I walked down the aisle to Mark, tears blurring my vision, seeing my entire future reflected in his hopeful eyes. We exchanged vows that felt utterly sacred, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, till death do us part. Those words, spoken with such conviction, would echo in my mind years later with a hollow, cruel irony. The first few years of our marriage were blissful. We bought a small house, painted the walls together, and slowly filled it with memories. We navigated the usual challenges of newlywed life, the compromises, the blending of two distinct personalities, but always with a bedrock of mutual respect and affection. Our careers flourished, and we supported each other every step of the way. Then came our children. Emily first, a tiny bundle of joy who transformed our world, followed 3 years later by Leo, a boisterous boy who completed our family. Motherhood was exhilarating and exhausting, but Mark was a devoted father, always ready to help with bath time, read bedtime stories, or brave a late-night diaper change. He was the kind of husband and father that friends envied. He was dependable, always there. Or so it seemed. Our life, from the outside looking in, was perfect. We had the house, the kids, stable jobs, annual holidays, and a comfortable routine. We hosted barbecues in the summer, celebrated holidays with gusto, and were always there for each other's triumphs and setbacks. I felt secure, anchored. I believed in the unwavering strength of our bond, in the promises we had made. Our love felt like a fortress, impenetrable, built to withstand anything. I had no idea that the foundations were silently crumbling beneath my feet, eroded by a secret current that Mark was desperately trying to keep hidden from the world, and most devastatingly, from me. My trust in him was absolute, a blind faith in the man I thought I knew completely. This trust, once my greatest comfort, would soon become my most profound vulnerability, leaving me utterly unprepared for the silent devastation that was slowly brewing beneath the surface of our perfectly curated life. The subtle shifts began so gradually I barely noticed them at first, like the tide creeping in, imperceptible until it's already halfway up the shore. It started small. Mark would come home later, citing demanding projects at work. He'd be tired, distant, his answers vague when I asked about his day. Our shared dinners, once a cherished ritual, became quieter, punctuated by his occasional bursts of irritability, usually over something trivial. I'd try to engage him, to bridge the growing gap, but he'd retreat, his gaze drifting away from mine. He started going out with colleagues more frequently, sometimes not coming home until the early hours. When I'd gently voice my concern, he'd snap, accusing me of being overprotective, untrusting. "Can't a man have some space?" he'd retort, his voice sharper than I was used to. I'd shrink back, chastising myself for being paranoid. "He's stressed," I told myself. "Work is demanding. We have 2 young children. It's natural for things to be a bit strained." I rationalized everything. His increasingly erratic moods, one moment withdrawn and brooding, the next overly jovial, almost manic. I chalked it up to stress. The way his eyes sometimes seemed unfocused, glassy, I put down to fatigue. The credit card statements that showed unusual expenses, large withdrawals from ATMs in unfamiliar neighborhoods, he explained away as business expenses, or gifts he was planning for me, or a miscalculation by the bank. Each explanation felt flimsy, but I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. The alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. Intimacy, both physical and emotional, dwindled. He'd avoid my touch, offering tired excuses. Our conversations became superficial, revolving around the children's schedules or household chores. The deep connection, the effortless flow of understanding that had once defined our relationship, was replaced by an uncomfortable silence, a vast unspoken chasm. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, constantly trying to predict his mood, to avoid upsetting him, to somehow coax back the man I loved. My own self-esteem began to erode. I started blaming myself. Was I not enough? Was I too needy? Had I let myself go? I would spend hours looking in the mirror, searching for flaws, trying to pinpoint what had changed in me that had pushed him away. I tried harder. I cooked his favorite meals, bought new clothes, planned surprise date nights. Most attempts were met with a lukewarm response, or worse, an outright rejection disguised as, "I'm too tired, honey." The dread in my stomach became a permanent fixture. It was a cold, clenching knot that tightened every time he left the house, every time his phone rang and he'd hastily step out of the room. I remember one evening, Emily, then 6, asked, "Why does Daddy always seem so sad, Mommy?" My heart broke a little. I hugged her tight, murmuring something about Daddy being busy at work, but the question lingered, a stark confirmation that even our children were sensing the shift. The house, once a sanctuary, began to feel like a stage where we performed a fragile charade of normalcy. The laughter felt forced, the smiles brittle. I started checking his pockets before doing laundry, scanning his emails when he left his laptop open, feeling a profound shame for my own actions, yet unable to stop the desperate search for answers. I found nothing concrete, just more ambiguous clues that fed my anxiety without providing a full picture. A crumpled receipt from a bar I'd never heard of, dated Tuesday morning. A text message from an unsaved number that read, "Got the stuff?" followed by an uncharacteristically quick deletion. Each discovery sent a jolt of fear through me, followed by a wave of guilt for invading his privacy. But the guilt was quickly overshadowed by the growing conviction that my suspicions, however vague, were not unfounded. The man I loved was slipping away, and I had no idea how to pull him back, or what dark current was dragging him into the unknown depths. The invisible chains of his secret were tightening around both of us, slowly strangling the life out of our marriage, and I was powerless, watching it happen, paralyzed by fear and a desperate, clinging hope that it was all just a terrible misunderstanding. The truth finally broke through, not with a sudden bang, but with a horrifying, drawn-out crack that splintered my reality. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation, not at first. It was a slow, agonizing unraveling that began on a Friday afternoon, a day etched into my memory with an acid clarity. I'd gone to the grocery store, a mundane errand that ended up being the catalyst for the greatest shock of my life. As I was loading bags into the trunk, my phone rang. It was Mark's boss, Mr. Henderson, a man I'd met only a handful of times at company events. His voice was grim, devoid of his usual cheerful professionalism. "Sarah, I'm so sorry to call you like this," he began, his tone sending a shiver down my spine. "But Mark hasn't been in for 3 days. We've tried calling him, emailing him. We're all worried. Is he okay?" The blood drained from my face. 3 days? Mark had left for work every morning. He'd kissed me goodbye. He'd sent me texts from his office. A cold dread seeped into my bones, instantly confirming all the vague fears that had been gnawing at me. He's been going to work, I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. He leaves every morning. There was a pause, a heavy silence pregnant with unspoken knowledge. Sarah, he hasn't. We haven't seen him. His projects are stalled. We've been covering for him, but we can't anymore. The phone call ended, but the echo of his words reverberated in my head, a terrifying symphony of betrayal. I drove home in a daze, the groceries forgotten in the trunk. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, my vision blurred by unshed tears. When I pulled into our driveway, I saw it. Mark's car was parked haphazardly, half on the lawn, half on the asphalt. He was home. A wave of frantic hope, quickly followed by a crushing despair, washed over me. I walked into the house, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The children weren't home yet, thankfully. I found him in the living room, sprawled on the sofa, fully dressed but utterly unresponsive. There was a half-empty glass on the coffee table, a faint but distinct smell of alcohol in the air, and beside it, a small, unmarked plastic bag containing what looked like pills. My breath hitched. Pills, not alcohol, not just alcohol. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the pieces falling into place. The mood swings, the evasiveness, the glazed eyes, the financial discrepancies, the disappearances. It all clicked into a horrific, undeniable picture. He wasn't just stressed, he was an addict. I knelt beside him, my hands shaking as I reached out to touch his arm. He mumbled something intelligible, his face pale and clammy. "Mark," I whispered, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. "Mark, wake up." He stirred, his eyes fluttering open, unfocused and distant. He looked at me but didn't seem to truly see me. A cold, hard knot of anger began to form in my chest, pushing through the initial shock and grief. "What is this, Mark?" I demanded, my voice raw, pointing a trembling finger at the bag of pills. He tried to sit up, his movements sluggish and uncoordinated. "Sarah, it's nothing," he mumbled, attempting to swat my hand away. "Nothing?" I almost screamed. "Your boss just called me. You haven't been to work in 3 days. You're lying here, drunk, on pills, and you tell me it's nothing?" The words poured out, years of suppressed worry, confusion, and fear erupting in a torrent of anguish. He finally looked at me, a flicker of shame in his eyes, quickly replaced by a desperate, trapped animal fear. "Please, Sarah, don't," he pleaded, his voice hoarse. "Don't what? Don't see what's right in front of my face? Don't recognize that the man I married is a stranger to me?" The dam broke completely. I confronted him with everything. The late nights, the suspicious expenses, the emotional distance. Each word was a shard of glass, cutting deeper into the illusion of our perfect life. He tried to deny it, to minimize it, to blame me, to blame work, to blame anything but himself. But I wouldn't let him. Not anymore. "You've been lying to me for years, Mark. You've been hiding this addiction, and you've let it destroy us from the inside out." He finally broke. The denials crumbled, replaced by a torrent of self-loathing, shame, and a desperate plea for forgiveness. He admitted to years of opioid abuse, initially prescribed for a back injury, which had spiraled out of control. The addiction had taken over, consumed him, turning him into a shadow of the man I loved. As he confessed, the full weight of the betrayal hit me. It wasn't just the addiction, it was the years of lies, the deliberate deception, the fundamental shattering of trust.
The man I shared my life with, the father of my children, had been living a secret life, carrying a burden that had slowly, quietly, systematically destroyed the very foundation of our marriage. My world, once so solid and predictable, had collapsed into a pile of ruins. The perfect life was a mirage, and the man I loved was lost somewhere within the ruins of his own making.
The aftermath of that horrifying revelation was a landscape of devastation. It wasn't a quick explosion, but a slow, agonizing descent into a purgatory of pain, anger, and profound confusion. The initial shock gave way to a relentless torrent of emotions, rage, scorching and consuming at the years of lies, the calculated deceptions, the utter disrespect for our marriage and our family. Then came a wave of crushing grief, mourning the loss of the man I thought I knew, the life I thought we had. And beneath it all, a deep, persistent ache of betrayal that permeated every cell of my being. The first few weeks were a blur of tears, shouting matches, and terrifying silences. Mark was a wreck, oscillating between desperate apologies, self-pitying withdrawal, and furious defensiveness when confronted with the magnitude of his actions. He was sick, I knew, but his illness didn't erase the years of deliberate concealment, the pain he had inflicted. I remember the day I had to call my parents and his, explaining in a voice that didn't sound like my own that Mark was in crisis and needed help. The shame was suffocating. Their shock and sorrow mirrored my own, amplifying the raw wound. Our children, Emily and Leo, bore the brunt of the unspoken tension. They picked up on the constant arguments, the hushed phone calls, the way I would burst into tears for no apparent reason. Emily started having nightmares, and Leo became unusually clingy. Shielding them from the full truth was a monumental task, and the guilt of living this lie in front of them was unbearable. We told them Daddy wasn't feeling well, that he needed to go away for a little while to get better. Their innocent questions, "When will Daddy be home? Is he very sick?" pierced my heart anew each time. The practical consequences were immediate and overwhelming. Mark lost his job. His company, understanding but unable to overlook the prolonged absences and dereliction of duty, terminated his employment. Suddenly, the financial stability we had always enjoyed vanished. We had savings, thankfully, but the prospect of a single income coupled with the looming costs of treatment was terrifying. I found myself handling all the bills, the household responsibilities, and the emotional burden of guiding our family through this catastrophe, all while feeling like I was barely treading water. We found a rehabilitation center for Mark, a residential program several hours away. The day I dropped him off was one of the hardest of my life. He looked broken, terrified, a shell of the confident man I had married. As I hugged him goodbye, I didn't know if I was saying goodbye to the man I loved, or to the life we had built, or both. The drive home was silent, punctuated only by my quiet sobs. The house felt emptier without him, yet also strangely lighter, as if a heavy shadow had been lifted, only to reveal the true extent of the damage. The journey of his recovery was a roller coaster. There were hopeful calls from the center, reports of progress, followed by moments of intense doubt and fear. I started attending Al-Anon meetings, seeking support and understanding from others who had walked a similar path. Hearing their stories, the raw honesty of their pain and resilience, slowly helped me process my own. I learned about the nature of addiction, about enabling, about setting boundaries, about protecting myself and my children. It was a painful education, stripping away my naivety and forcing me to confront uncomfortable truths about my own role in the dynamic, however unintentional.
When Mark returned home after 3 months of intensive treatment, he was a different man in some ways. He was sober, fragile, and filled with a profound remorse. But the damage wasn't magically undone. The trust was shattered. Every hesitant step towards rebuilding was fraught with suspicion and fear. A late text, a closed-door conversation, a moment of withdrawal, each small instance triggered a fresh wave of anxiety and doubt. We started marriage counseling, a grueling, emotionally draining process. We unearthed years of unspoken resentments, fears, and the deep-seated insecurities that had perhaps contributed to his addiction, and certainly to my struggle to confront it. We talked about the betrayal, the lies, the fear, the anger, the pain. There were days I wanted to give up, to simply walk away from the wreckage. The thought of a life without him was terrifying, but the thought of living with the constant fear of relapse, of another betrayal, felt equally unbearable. I felt utterly alone, burdened by a responsibility I never asked for, trying to keep our family afloat while my own heart was in tatters. The consequences were not just emotional and financial, but deeply personal. I had to redefine myself, not just as a wife and mother, but as a woman who had endured profound pain and was learning to find her voice again, to stand firm in her boundaries, and to fight for a future that was truly healthy, even if it meant letting go of the past completely.
It's been 5 years since that Tuesday morning. 5 years since the shattering truth of Mark's addiction ripped through our lives. And I can tell you with a quiet certainty that has been hard-won that our story isn't a neat, tied-up Hollywood ending. It's something far more real, far more messy, and ultimately far more profound. Mark has maintained his sobriety. That is a miracle, one we celebrate daily, sometimes with joy, sometimes with a quiet, terrified gratitude. He works tirelessly on his recovery, attending meetings, seeing his sponsor, and engaging in therapy. He's found a new job, one he's passionate about, and he's slowly, painstakingly rebuilt his reputation and his self-worth. He's also worked relentlessly to earn back my trust and the trust of our children. But trust, once broken so profoundly, is like a mosaic. Even when painstakingly reassembled, the cracks always remain visible, a testament to the damage it endured. Our marriage is no longer the idyllic, unquestioning bond it once was. It's a relationship forged in fire, stripped bare of illusions, and rebuilt with brutal honesty and an unwavering commitment to communication. We still go to therapy, individually and sometimes together. We've learned to talk about the uncomfortable things, the triggers, the fears, the lingering resentments, and the deep-seated pain. There are days when the shadows of the past loom large, when a small change in his demeanor sends a jolt of fear through my heart, when I find myself quietly checking on him. These moments are fewer now, but they are a stark reminder of how close we came to losing everything. What did I learn through all of this? I learned about resilience, not just his, but my own. I discovered a strength within myself I never knew I possessed, a fierce protectiveness for my children and for my own well-being. I learned that love, even resilient love, isn't enough to heal deep wounds, but it can be the force that compels you to do the hard work of healing. I learned about boundaries, about saying no, about recognizing that I couldn't save him, that he had to save himself, and that my primary responsibility was to myself and our children. I learned that forgiveness isn't a single event, but a continuous process, a conscious choice made again and again, especially on the days when the memory of betrayal feels freshest. It doesn't erase the past, but it allows you to move forward without being chained to it. I also learned a universal life lesson, that true strength lies not in avoiding pain, but in confronting it head-on, in walking through the fire and emerging, scarred but unbroken.
It taught me the crucial importance of self-preservation, of not losing yourself in another person's struggles, no matter how much you love them. Our children, Emily and Leo, are older now. They understand more than they let on, but they have also witnessed the incredible journey of their father's recovery and the unwavering, albeit complicated, strength of our family. We talk to them openly, in age-appropriate ways, about health, about choices, and about the importance of honesty. They've seen that even when things break, they can be put together, sometimes stronger, sometimes just different, but always with a newfound appreciation for the effort it takes. Our life now is quieter, perhaps less outwardly glamorous than before, but it is infused with a profound sense of gratitude and authenticity. There's an honesty in our everyday interactions that wasn't there when the addiction lurked in the shadows. The laughter in our home is real, the smiles genuine, because they are built on a foundation of truth, however painful it was to lay. Mark and I are still together. We are rebuilding our life, not to replicate what was lost, but to create something new, something more honest and resilient. It's a daily commitment, a conscious choice to choose recovery, to choose connection, to choose a future where secrets no longer have the power to destroy. This journey has been the most challenging of my life, but it has also been the most transformative. It taught me that love, even resilient love, must be earned and re-earned, and that true strength is found not in perfection, but in the courage to face your imperfections, to fall, and to rise again, together.